Let the word go
The
forth.
challenge, the opportunity to connect. The 1960s, a time of imagination and change, a time of anger and fear. The 1960s, a pioneering program called Challenge
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
that looked at our connections, our divisions, through the lens of shared values.
For something real.
60 years later, we examine our divisions, our connections, our shared pains and successes in a new program called Challenge 2.0. The November 2024 elections left many Americans deeply troubled. Whatever our individual opinions might be, what approaches and thoughts will best help us navigate the uncertainty of the coming months? In this episode of Challenge 2.0, we turn to three leaders from the major faiths of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam to offer their perspectives and their guidance. Well, we're very fortunate to have with us three very perceptive guests who I think in the situation we're facing right now are going to offer some very helpful wisdom. So
Thank you.
we welcome Rabbi Olivier Ben Chaim from Bet Aleph Meditative Synagogue, Imam Jamal Rahman from Interfaith Community Sanctuary, and Pastor Dave Brown from the Presbyterian Church. And so thank you, each of you, for being here today. I know that each of you provide both formal and informal counsel to members of your faith communities. We might just begin with, what have you been hearing from them in the period since the November election? Dave?
It may say something about me and something about the division in the country. Most of the folks, all of the folks I'm in contact with, are heartbroken by the results of the election. I admit I don't have in my bubble or in my circle many people that were celebrating the results of the election. And
On the national basis.
On the national basis. And across the country, through the musicians I know, through Blues Vespers, I'm getting emails and text of several kinds. One, there's real fear of what's going to happen to them, what's going to happen to the country. And then the other, almost a deep existential disappointment that somebody with some of the character issues and some of the reputation of as the president-elect got elected by a majority of our citizens to be the president. And so there's that fear factor, and then there is that deep, deep disappointment. And I'm hearing the fear factor also from family members and dear friends and fellow travelers who are part of the trans community, who are lesbian or gay or bi. They're scared about what this might possibly mean for them as this administration is not friendly to their lifestyle and is not supportive of a deep inclusion.
Jamal or Olivier?
Yes. So I would just add on to that I'm sensing a lot of despair. But of course, don't forget, we live in a bubble here.
Right. Right.
So there's a lot of despair that, how is it possible that a significant portion of the population, they chose someone who appealed to the baser, sordid elements of the ego, pride, arrogance, fear, anger, hate, and nothing much about feeding the soul, for example. Prophet Muhammad was asked, what would you say is the downfall of humanity? And he replied, pride and arrogance. So I'm sensing also that people are feeling that, there is a decline in moral values in the nation, which will lead to disempowerment of the Constitution, democracy, and a decaying of the fortunes of this nation. So there's some sort of fearful mourning I'm feeling. In the Islamic tradition, they say about these leaders, this kind of leader, all fireworks and no light, all husk and no kernel. And that is a source of despair, sadness and mourning.
Olivier, what are you hearing?
Exactly the same thing. I mean, again, we live in a very particular place in the nation and in our political bubbles. And of course, this is what we're going to be faced with, or what people are going to feel. I mean, how do you not How can you not feel this way when you had a year-long campaign that has pitted the other side as the end of the world?
Mm-hmm.
You know, the kind of rhetoric that we are seeing. We live in a political moment where there are no debates of ideas anymore. We live in a political moment where it seems the only tool to win is to describe the other side as the greatest evil that ever was. And so you bypass all that is important in a nation to be talking about, our real issues, our real problems. And you come out of an election where the rhetoric has been, if you elect the other, it's the end of democracy, it's the end of America, it's the end of the world. So no wonder people are feeling such great despair. People are feeling so much like it's an existential crisis, as you mentioned, because we've been influenced and moved to really get to so deep trenches that it feels that now we're in a battle with each other. We are at war with each other. And so the despair gets even sharper when it's so black and white, when it's so sharply divided. And now it's like, where's my pitchfork? Because they're going to come after me. They're going, all of that rhetoric is now overwhelming everyone that that is on the losing end of the democratic process. So it's a consequence of what our politicians are doing and our media is doing to just amp up all of this and prevent us from actually really talking to each other about how do we want this country to move forward in a realistic, not hyperbole, in realistic, tangible ways. So,
if I
Go
could
ahead.
just add
Yeah.
a particular note from my faith tradition, I just spend a significant amount of my Pastor Dave time outside of the church, working with musicians and artists and connecting with people that would consider themselves spiritual, not religious, and befriending people and being a community cheerleader, so to speak. And some of them have come hard at me. Well, you're one of his beautiful Christians. And I've gotten messages, well, what do you think of all these Christians that elected this new president? And I think it has really struck me that it's time to really think about the difference within the Christian household between a Christian identity, that you identify with a tribe, versus somebody who makes a deep decision to follow the spirituality and the way of Jesus, rather than just identifying with a certain brand name or label. Because you see very few Christian teachings, love your neighbor, what this you do for the least of these you do unto me, in that agenda. But you do see a certain cultural, mainly white nationalist agenda. But I've been hit fairly hard by my people that are recovering from negative church experiences, or those outside that are sort of a little cynical. Well, Pastor Dave, what do you think on that? And having to really explain that not all Christians are like that, and how poor a job perhaps we've done in talking about the diversity within the Christian household.
Another very quick note, a despair that, my goodness, this is becoming like I come from a developing country, where the politics, after election is, the main focus is now put all your time and energy in winning the next election in any way you can. And all that work about serving the common good, which is this political rhetoric, just falls, on the wayside.
Yeah.
And from day one, it just becomes, how can I, by hook or crook, win the election? Unfortunately, it's happening here now also.
Yes.
And that's very sad.
Yes.
Any observations as to why that's the case? Why it's happening here now that we've seen typically in what you'd associate with a third world nation?
Yeah, I think it's connected to what I was talking about earlier. There really has been a radical shift in the political conversation in America over the last several decades, and it has reached kind of a crescendo. We're in front of a precipice that it's really hard to walk back from, and to me, it's exemplified in what we saw in January 6th. It's exemplified with the assassination attempt on one of the candidates. It's exemplified by the notion that we have to be part of the resistance now instead of the opposition, which is a democratic way to engage in a political discourse. Like everything is, like I said, everything is like we have barricades, and it's all about win-win-win. It's not about. It's almost we're missing the opportunity to be constructive in constructive criticism, and being in the opposition for 4 years or however long it is. It's part of being part of a democracy. But now it's so dire. It's so everything is life-threatening. The rhetoric is out of control.
Yeah.
It's out of control.
And the rhetoric we hear in the media, we all are now living in our bubble.
Yeah.
We don't, and there's lots of critics of the so-called mainstream media, but everybody now is getting their own podcast. They're hearing from this person that is speaking what they want to hear from their perspective, or this person here, rather than somebody who's a trained journalist who knows how to check sources and knows how to have diverse opinions.
When you talk about the sharpness of the emotions, the level of despair, what do you fear can happen? And I think we've alluded to that already, but what do you fear can happen to people if that despair, those emotions aren't dealt with constructively? And we're going to talk about how to deal with that, but what is the downside if we don't deal with that on an individual basis or a collective basis in an effective way?
I'd like to just go back to the other point initially. As an outsider from South Asia, to answer your question, a major problem is that so much change is coming. White privilege, Christianity being a privileged religion, all that is being challenged. And this is happening all over the world, actually. And that is causing a lot of consternation. I see a lot of the division that's happening is because of those inevitable changes in the diversity of, Hispanics are increasing in number, African Americans increasing in number. They'll become the majority in 50 years. Christianity, there's Christian nationalism now as a result of that. That is creating a huge backlash, and that is the major problem. To the other point you mentioned, all of this is causing, for example, a lot of anger for those who are losing their power, their privilege. And if one doesn't take care of that, doesn't have some spiritual practices to restrain even what is righteous anger, that festers into a need for revenge. Even for me as a person, if I'm so upset at what's happening because of the elections, I'm very angry. But if I don't put it into place, restrain myself, that can really become gangrenous into hitting out. If I have fear, that turns into paranoia. If I have sadness, if I don't have some technique to take care of that, that becomes a very severe depression. Another point I want to make, the Quran makes it very clearly. They say when there's chronic anger, fear, sadness, helplessness, hopelessness, it's not that the eyes become blind, the hearts become blind. When the hearts become blind, then one is capable of really doing things that are absolutely terrible. The Quran says you're capable of doing something which is higher than the angels, but also you can sink lower than the most savage beasts, because my heart has been completely blinded. That's a danger.
No, I think I would agree with what has been shared already. I think when people fall into this kind of profound despair and alienation that is not skillfully dealt with, or how do I say, help, then it could really lead to further extremist positions, and unfortunately, even acts of violence, as we've already seen, and it could really spread through the population. And I think we could really, if nothing is done to to bring us back from the brink with the rhetoric, with what we are hearing around us right now post-election. I think some people will take matters into their own hands, and we know that we have a gun problem in this country and a drug problem in this country.
Yeah.
So it is very concerning. We need to have our leaders, wherever they are, in our churches, in the alleys of power, come out and say it's okay. We're gonna be okay. We're gonna manage the next 4 years. We're going to, we're going to engage in the democratic process. This is not the end of the world. We're going to be here to support those who are the more vulnerable. We're going to work. We're going to do the work that is needed. I think there is a message that needs to be sent as soon as possible before everything really gets blown out of proportion and it becomes violent.
What would you briefly recommend people do when they feel themselves going down the drain, as it were, of that?
As someone whose job is to support people on their spiritual journey, I would really invite anyone to actually take a step back and kind of turn inward, because the focus and the hypnosis is so much on the outside, and the doom scrolling and all of that we're sucked into on the outside. I would invite people to turn inward and to find the light and to find the heart that Brother Jamal was talking about, and to really source themselves, their behavior within the light of their own being. And there are many tools that spiritual paths the world over are provided us with. Meditation, but it doesn't have to be sitting on a cushion and meditating. It could be reconnect with the world, reconnect with nature. We are blessed here in the Northwest to have beautiful trails and paths to travel through, and find again what is real. Just take your shoes off and walk on the grass. There's life still happening, and to find a way spiritually, physically, to ground ourselves back into the reality of here and of now. Obviously meditation is part of that. To learn again from the teachings of impermanence, that are all of our traditions speak of, and say, this too shall pass. It's one of the meditations that I have led members of my community through, and to really kind of embrace, okay, there's a deeper reality here, and this too shall pass. This too will come and go, because everything comes and goes, and to be able to be in the flow of life instead of resisting life is what each of our spiritual journeys is about. So that's always my invitation to people that are engaged in this spiritual path for themselves.
And my answer might be a little bit different. I mean, I think there is some real fear that of the pain that's going to happen, and to say this too shall pass may not take for some the full seriousness of what may actually happen to people during this time. And I do think we need, in my tradition, following the way of Jesus, we need to stand with the vulnerable and to relieve the pain and to protect those that are most vulnerable, whatever we are doing to the least of these, the undocumented people that the president-elect has called vermin. Whatever happens to them, we're doing to Jesus in the Christian household. But I think we balance that.
Yeah, but as Brother Jamal was saying earlier, we can do all that, but we need to source that from a place of love.
Yes.
From a place of understanding, of gathering instead of rejecting. If we do it from the place of fear and the place of rejection and the place of war,
right, exactly,
then it's not going to be supportive in the long run of our own personal health as well.
To what Rabbi Olivier said, I also would add, from the Celtic tradition, Christian tradition, find a soul friend. Somebody that you don't talk about the Seahawks with, or you don't plan your next dinner party alone with, but somebody that you actually could talk about what's on your heart. and you have a sense of confidentiality on that. Do small acts of kindness. They do, if you see somebody struggling to take a selfie, could I take your picture?
Right.
And be kind.
I would say this is where actually the core of religion is so powerful and so beautiful and so useful. Because every tradition, as you were saying, has so many different practices. So you mentioned silence. That is so critical, just to practice silence, which is not the absence of sound. It is the absence of the little self, the I, me. And that's possible with practice. I would also suggest very much that all the traditions say the difficult feelings which come up, deal with that. Like Carl Jung, and I've said it so many times in the program here, the wonderful words of Carl Jung. Would you once in your life have the courage and grace to kiss the demons and dragons within you? That is how they turn into a prince or princess. I'm teaching a class of the Book of Joy by Desmond Tutu, Dalai Lama. Are you familiar with that? Yes. And there they emphasize that, these difficult feelings are inevitable. It's a world of opposites. Every religion talks about it. But Jamal, the way you acknowledge it, heal it, and reframe it is going to sculpt your character and sculpt the destiny of your life. So some techniques in dealing with the feelings. So in Sufism we say, that which is coming up, these difficult feelings, are really an invitation for you to acknowledge them, embrace them, heal them, and integrate them. And then that makes you a more complete human being. So there's a program called Sacred Holding. What am I feeling? Where am I feeling it? Let me just be present with it, talk to it, then breathe through it. Then that really deepens my being, you might say. That's why, in the tradition they say, don't run towards pain and suffering, just don't run away from it. But deal with it, heal it, reframe it. That's one. And very quickly I want to tell you, the other thing is thinking, the thoughts. So many thoughts are coming up, so many thoughts. And so the traditions say, if these thoughts come up, that's beautiful, but be mindful, because if you're not mindful, it festers into a difficult feeling, anger, jealousy, hate. If I don't take care of that, it festers into what is called negative imaginary scenarios. In my mind, I'm already taking revenge, I'm doing this, I'm hitting out, I'm killing this and that. If I don't take care of that through some spiritual practice, it is going to manifest, because scientifically, all the realms are interconnected. I cannot say that's just the imaginal realm and this is the realistic realm. They're all interconnected. So that's why the techniques in every tradition, in Buddhism, Hinduism, if you have a negative thought, negative imaginary scenario, they say, neti, not real, not that. In modern technology, they say, delete, cancel. Reboot, that's right. But be mindful of it, be mindful of those negative thoughts, because what does the Buddha say? We are what we think. Everything that we are arises with our thoughts. But as my brother was saying, there are lots of techniques to deal with that.
You were mentioning the course you're teaching on the Book of Joy.
Yes.
And I think we might put on the screen how people can access that. And I know both of you have some excellent longer-term programs. Dave, what would you have as a longer-term intervention or program that you think might be helpful to people?
I don't know if there's one formula that I would have. I mean, I would obviously encourage people to seek spiritual community, not a middle-class social club or not someplace that's simply about organizing, but someplace that really feeds your spirit and helps create your vision.
Olivier, I think you're starting a program, are you not?
Yes, I am. Actually, it's just started a couple days ago. And my inspiration actually really was from my rabbi, my teacher, Rabbi Ted Falcon, who always talked about, and I'm paraphrasing, but whatever is happening on the outside is only a reflection of what is happening on the inside. And so I took I took this teaching to heart and invited people to see and to engage in a practice which will be over 3 months, actually, weekly, to really look at, okay, where, turn inward, like I mentioned earlier, and take a really good look at the landscape that we have each within us, and how we can see that, being reflected oftentimes on the outside, and how do we work on transforming ourselves from within in order to transform the world from without, because it has to start, as my rabbi always said, right? It can only start in one place. It's right here, right now, within each and every one of us. And so that's the work that I'm inviting people into, to explore this landscape and to find within us where the problems might also be in our own makeup, and to heal that, and to then come out of this practice with a renewed sense of how do I, from that source, from that ground, can impact the circle of people that I touch immediately, and then beyond that. But it has to start right here.
Thank you, each of you. And thank you for all of you for tuning into this episode of Challenge 2.0. Again, thanks to each of you for sharing so deeply of yourself, and we hope you'll join us for the next edition of Challenge 2.0. Thank you very much.